Hey guys, welcome back to the SS454 Garage. In this video, I am cutting up the frame in my original 1971 Chevelle SS454 because we're installing coilovers using the Global West Extended Travel Kit. So stay tuned. Now I'm going to address something right now. A lot of people think that you're going to get improved handling by going with a coilover setup, and that is simply not true. You can get the exact same handling with a conventional spring as you can with a coilover because your handling characteristics are determined by your spring rate, your ride height, your shock settings, of course your sway bars, and all of that is the same whether it's conventional or coilover. So why am I going with coilovers? Well, there's two main reasons. Number one, I currently have double adjustable shocks on my setup right now, and I simply can't reach them unless I have the car jacked up, the wheels turned, and I have to get in there with a screwdriver and also a little pry bar just to make the little adjustments, and I can't do that when the car is sitting at ride height. So this is at full droop, and you can see just how hard it is to get in there to the adjustment knobs. The other reason, and this is a big one, ride height. Well, obviously, I am changing the weight of the front of my vehicle with the new engine because I'm going with aluminum heads. And naturally, if you change the ride height of your vehicle, it is, you might not like the appearance of it. So coilovers give you freedom to change the ride height with ease. I decided to go with an extended travel kit. This one is from Global West. Several other companies make their own versions. UMI make a nice one. I went with Global West because I feel like it's a little bit more robust with all these little bracings and whatnot, but it does come at the expense of weight. This weighs about 3.8 pounds per side, so just keep that in mind. What are the benefits of an extended travel kit? Well, you get obviously a longer spring, and there's advantages to that. Now, you can get a hybrid coilover, which has your typical T-bar connection or whatever on your lower control arm, but then it has a more traditional spring that sits inside your stock spring pocket of your frame, and you're going to be limited to like a 9-inch spring on that. Whereas with an extended travel kit, you're going to at least get a 12-inch spring. And that's very good for especially drag racing applications, because you'll have more stored energy, and that's really important on the launch, especially because you want that spring to have all that energy. You launch, it releases it, and away you go, better 60 foot times. So again, that's a good thing. However, this does mean you're going to have to cut up the frame, and that is permanent. So that is the downside. So what comes in the Global West kit? Obviously, you get two of the spring pockets. One is labeled D, one is labeled P. P for passenger, D for driver. Colored instructions, which is good. All the hardware that you need. And some templates that will help you mark and cut your frame because you want that to be as easy and accurate as possible. So we have the car on jack stands, the wheels off. We can now get to disassembling our front end. Well, hopefully this pops the ball joint without doing any kind of damage. There we go. That's why we keep the castle nut on. It just popped. Ooh. Oh my gosh. There we go. And now this template will go along the back side right here. With our shock mount cut off, we can use the second template. And this is supposed to go center between the bolts. So something like that and that. And then I can draw around it with my pen. But you'll notice if I go completely down here in a nice straight line, I'll be way down here. And that seems way too much. So I'm going to come in at about a 45-degree angle, cut somewhere up there, because I'd rather cut more later than cut too much now and screw it all up. So I'm cutting away, and this curve right here has me a bit concerned. I feel like it's going to be a big giant open hole if I cut all the way down like here, like they suggest I do. I don't know. I feel like I should cut here and then try bending it forward, and hopefully that'll kind of fill that. But I just don't want to cut too much and have a giant hole. That's my worry. It's not mentioned in the instructions, but this tab that helps locate the original spring, it's getting in the way, so I'm going to cut that off, and hopefully that's going to allow me to slide this sucker in. With the bracket in, now look at the gaps. They are way worse. That side is terrible. And where that big half curve section is there, I knew it, that I should have left more material there. You can see how that comes up. You can see it. So if you cut straight across like they show you in the instructions, you're going to have this big open hole. Like, I don't know what they're talking about. You can see it tells you to cut nice and low. You can see the cut is nice and low. And then theirs is nice and flush, and it looks great. That is not the same. Plus these bolts, they simply do not push in. It's probably because when they welded it, it got all warped and out of alignment. That's a problem, because once you have this installed, and let's say you want to remove your control arms, well, good luck getting these bolts out, because they're not just going to slide out there. But anyways, the main thing is these gaps are bad, and I'm going to show you it's going to be worse. With it bolted down using some sockets to keep everything nice and aligned, now look at the gaps. They are absolutely terrible. Like, man, I'm very happy I have at least a little bit of metal right here that I can use to go around that. But man, filling these gaps, I'm not a welder or a fabricator, so gosh, it's going to take me hours to fix that. Ugh. Also, this back plate right here with this whatever cutout right there, I feel like it's upside down. Like, what's the point of that? It doesn't sit flush or anything, so I don't get that. I feel like it makes more sense the other way around. So gosh, I don't know what these guys are doing. But anyways, now that it's temporarily installed, I can hook up my suspension again, and we can get a measurement for our coilovers. All right, this template that is provided, it's a piece of crap. They tell you to bolt it on, draw a line, and cut out the frame like so. The problem is, when you go to put in your bracket, these dowels right here, they hit it, right? On both sides, it becomes a problem. So you end up cutting open your frame a lot just to get them in place. And then when you bolt your bracket in, look at the gaps that you'll have. They're terrible. So I recommend cutting down this portion of your frame. Just cut that off, straight line down, away it goes. You're not going to lose much strength. I mean, what's it really doing? These, extensions right here, it's not doing anything. You still have strength from the supports right here on both sides. Plus, when you have your bracket welded in, right around here, that is all going to tie this in. Plus, it's bolted in as well. You'll have it all welded around. So it all becomes one piece. So you don't need it. So cut this out, a nice straight line, to make your life so much easier. All right, guys, I'm not going to lie to you. There are some issues with this kit. Now, I'm not here to bash the company. I'm just going to tell you the truth. Well, starting with this backing plate, this is supposed to weld against the frame, and it makes sense to give it some strength and rigidity. However, at least on 71 and 72 frames, probably even 70 and before, there is a kick out to allow clearance for the coil spring, and that means there is nothing for this backing plate to weld to. It's just air, except for a little bit in the corner here and here. And then with my coil spring, at least, I'm getting some contact and interference down here at maximum extension. But what's worse is these steel tubings that you bolt through to the frame, they're not square to the frame at all.
So if I use this template as a straight edge, I don't know if you can see this, but there's a bit of a V going on, right? And let's see if I can, I'll square that up there, move it up. You can see just how much that's changing, right? Now that might seem like a little bit, but it's actually quite significant because when you bolt this to your frame, that's going to tilt this bracket forward. And that reduces the clearance to your coil spring under compression. In fact, at maximum compression, I'm having some contact right in here. So that would have to be addressed. Also, when you have your hole to your frame and you tilt that forward, that's going to open up that gap just a little bit. And if you already have big gaps, that's going to make it worse. And you could get big gaps because this template is too big. So if I match that up, this template is at least a good 1/8 of an inch around the front. And then there's another 1/8 of an inch in the back. So this is too big. So if you use this template and you cut it around perfectly, you would have a much too big of hole, and that would be hard to weld in. And then lastly, there are some discrepancies with the gap up here. So I contacted Global West, told them the issues, sent them some pictures. I even suggested that they flip this plate around. You'd have the notch on the back, and then you should have a straight edge that you could potentially weld against to your frame. They said, no problem, we'll send you a new one. 6 weeks later, all they did was send me a new piece with a different plate, which has a reduced gap, which still doesn't touch the frame. I'm still getting contact back here. And these metal tubings, they're still crazy out. Let me show you this. If I butt these two together, I should be able to put these bolts straight through, and they should go through. They don't. Even if I put them at different kinds of angles, if I get one to go in, there is no chance for the other one. Like, they are way off, and I hate it. Oh, it's hard to get them out because it's so bad. They got terrible. And then these, the gap up here, it's even worse. Let me show you this too. This is the eyelet bearing for my coilover. It's 1.25 inches wide. This one fits pretty good. This one, not as good. This one, absolutely terrible. That's about 1/8 of an inch of a gap. Now, I don't care what this measurement is supposed to be. They're all supposed to be the same. So the fact that they're this out from each other, that's unacceptable to me. And of course, I called Global West and I told them the issue, sent them some pictures, and they're very, very nice on the phone. Like, they seem like good people. I'm not gonna lie about that. That's awesome. They seem fine. Unfortunately, they don't seem like they're willing to do anything. Basically, they're chalking it down to it's my frame, and I don't buy that. These manufacturing differences in here, that has nothing to do with my frame. The fact that these are all different angles, that has nothing to do with anybody's frame. So I don't know. It is what it is. So I'm left with a couple of options. I can either just leave it as is, run it, hope for the best. I might have to change a few parts, including my coilovers, which would be very, very expensive. I can modify it, which good luck cutting these welds all around here. They do such a good job welding it. That would be very difficult without completely butchering this. Or I could build my own, which isn't impossible, but that does come with its own challenges, costs, and time. And to be honest with you, it's actually put me in a bit of a state of paralysis trying to figure out what to do. So the point of showing you all this, though, is buyer beware.
Before selecting a coilover, you need to get a measurement between the center of the mount on your frame and the center of the mount on your lower control arm. You need to get this measurement at ride height, but also it's a good idea to get a measurement at your suspension's maximum compression and maximum extension. Tell these measurements to your coilover providers so they can help you select the correct one for you. My measurements came out to 15.5 inches at ride height, 14 inches max compression, and 18 1/8 inches at full droop. Let's talk about the coilovers, what I went with and what options are available. I highly recommend going with Viking Performance. I used them in the past with the standard shocks front and rear, and then I upgraded to their rear coilover, and now obviously in the front as well. Great bang for the buck and a very high quality. Now, Viking offers 4 different options for their shocks and coilovers, starting with the Warrior series, which is kind of their standard lineup. It is a great value. In fact, it's probably their best value, best bang for the buck.
It is a double adjustable with 19 positions on the compression, 19 on the rebound. And honestly, it's probably the one that I would recommend to most. If your car is 99% street driven, more of a cruiser, then go with the Voyager series, which is, again, double adjustable, 19 positions on the compression, but 22 positions on the rebound. In both the Voyager and the Warrior series, you cannot change the valvings. They come up as they are. The next step up is the Berserker series, which is what I went with. And this comes in 3 different options: the double adjustable, the triple adjustable, which is what I went with, and the quad adjustable. Now the double adjustable has 19 settings on the compression and the rebound. The triple adjustable has 22 settings on the low speed compression, 23 settings on the high speed compression, and then 19 settings on the rebound. The quad has 22 settings for both compression and rebound, both high speed and low speed. Now, one thing to note, and this is important before you go to purchase, is that the triple adjustable, the body of the shock is 0.3 of an inch taller than the double adjustable, and the quad is 0.8 of an inch. So that can have an effect on your extension as well as your full compression height. So you need to double check that before you go and purchase these. For the valving, these can be selected to your choice. I went with the H on the compression and B on the rebound. And that should give me a nice compromise between street driving, road course driving, and drag racing. And honestly, I didn't know what to select, so all I did was call them up, told them what I was going to do with my car, and that is what they recommended. If I find that I don't like it, I can send these back and have them revalved, which is very, very nice. Lastly, there is the Crusader series, and those are competition only. They're double adjustable or triple adjustables. The doubles are 19 settings on the compression, 22 on the rebound, and then for the triples, we have 22 on the low speed, 23 on the high speed, and then 22 on the rebound. I'll be using a 14-inch tall or 14-inch long spring, which is recommended for the coilover that I went with, which is a Viking Berserker C711. Now, Viking does not offer a 14-inch spring in the rate that I want, so I had to go with a iBox spring. Now, they make good quality springs, and they have a tremendous selection of different rates. And I've gone with a 500-pound spring rate. Now, when it comes to selecting your spring rate, the length of your spring does matter. 500 pounds is not just simply 500 pounds no matter what. If you go on a Viking's website and you search for your application or whatever, and you find a 12-inch spring, it might be 500 pounds. But if you find it in a 7-inch spring, you'll be looking at maybe 650 pounds. So the shorter the spring, the heavier rate you're going to need to go with. Now, I mentioned that this is a 14-inch tall spring, 500-pound rate. The original spring is 15.3 inches tall and was rated at 435 pounds. If I wanted this 14-inch spring to have roughly the same characteristics as this spring, it would have been wise for me to go with a 475-pound spring. But I wanted a slightly stiffer spring rate, plus the fact that my front end is going to be a little bit lighter, so this should do a little bit better for me. And if I don't like it, well, it's going to be very easy to switch these out. When you're ready to purchase your Viking coilovers, I recommend going with UMIperformance.com. I tried to buy these direct from Viking, however their shipping charges were outrageous. So I went with UMI, and their pricing for their Viking products is the same, but their shipping charges are a lot less. In fact, I saved like 50 bucks just in shipping alone, so that was really good. Also, UMI has different kinds of products that might suit your projects, like upper control arms, lower control arms. In fact, they have a lower control arm specifically designed for coilovers, which I think is the best out there, because the cradle in which your coilover sits in, it can swing out and you don't have to unbolt the entire lower control arm, which means you don't have to pop off the ball joints, which is great and super handy. So yeah, for your needs, check out UMIperformance.com. Let me show you what comes in the box. You have a lower seat for your coil spring, goes on about there. This has the thrust bearing on it, which you have to buy separately, but I highly recommend it. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult to make adjustments to your ride height. And also you get 2 thrust bearings per package, so keep that in mind. Then you have a jam nut, and then you have some spanner wrenches to tighten those up. And then you have the upper seat for your coil spring, which goes on about there. In my case, I am running a T-bar on the bottom. So you have to buy those separate as well. And you have to buy 2 of them. And I also opted to get a 1.25 inch I-bearing to go on the top because I feel like that's going to distribute the weight load a little bit better than your standard 1 inch bearing. So I'm just checking my clearances. This is at maximum compression. This roll of tape right here represents the maximum diameter of my coil spring. And you can see that is super, super close. And I've marked on the bracket where that is the closest, so I'm going to have to do a little bit of clearancing there because that is just too close for comfort. And you can see how far I am up on the bump stop. But yeah, that will have to be addressed. So I'm just double and triple checking the full travel of the suspension, making sure nothing's binding, there's no clearance issues, making sure it's not bottoming out. We're at full compression, and you can see I'm right on the bump stop. It's not going any higher from that little jack right there. And you can see I'm about 1/4 inch from bottoming out the shock. So we're really maximizing the travel of this coilover. I wish I had at least 1/2 inch bump stop right in there, but those are hard to find in general and almost impossible locally. But I'll see if I can source something, because that would be nice to give me a little insurance, I guess you could say. You can see how much this tire is tucked into the fenders. I have about 4 inches of up travel from ride height, so that's not too bad. And then over here, I need to have a bump stop for maximum droop or maximum extension. And I think I'm going to go with these Energy Suspension bump stops right here. They're polyurethane. Super hard though. I wish they were a bit softer to absorb a little easier, but either way, this is the best that I could find. This is the ultra low profile version, which is 3/8 of an inch tall. And they do make a low profile and a normal one. I just 3D printed these just so I could test things out. And you can see that this will give me, a profile of where it's going to sit. And then I have the center right there so I can find where I'm going to drill my hole into the frame. And you can see how that sits. So that'll give me pretty good amount of travel. Now, I don't think I'm even going to hit these bump stops because when I have my sway bar on, it typically doesn't come close to that. But I think this will be okay, though. I mean, it's better than going metal to metal, but it's still not ideal. I would rather not hit off this point of the control arm, so I may still have to put in a limiting strap. We'll see once everything's put together. Not too bad. Because the bottom of the frame is an awkward shape, I'm going to use this rubber washer beneath a normal washer, and that should tighten up nicely. Let's see our full suspension travel here. That's a lot of suspension travel. I absolutely hate this gap that I have right here, so I bent up this piece of metal, and that's going to fill that in like so. So I'll just weld it into place, do a little bit of grinding, and then that can go in. That looks a lot better. I have my suspension a little bit past full extension, but if you can see this, that coil spring is touching and in fact overhanging on that backing plate by about 1/8 of an inch. So that back plate can't be there. So I'll cut that out. I've cut the back plate out of this one, and it's given me all kinds of clearance down there, but I'll have to do a little bit of clearancing right here on this edge because it is pretty close. And then I found that this coil spring is contacting this
piece of the bracket right there, so I'll have to do some clearancing right there. And what's interesting, because the brackets or the back blade's gone, this thing can flex. Look how much that's moved up there. It's opened this up quite a bit. And that could simply be because this coil spring is pushing that out, but once I figure this side out, I'll see what's happening up here. Let me show you the modifications I made to this bracket. I've cut off the backing plate, which now gives me plenty of clearance to the coil spring. It's not contacting anywhere. And now I have these edges right here that can weld straight to the frame. That's great. Just note when you cut that off, the only thing holding this together is this front portion of the loop, which means this can flex. It can flex quite a bit. Shouldn't be an issue once it's all welded to your frame. Also, it poses an extra challenge for when you're installing it, because when you tighten these down, you can get these tubes right here to, I guess, straighten out or flatten out and square up to your frame, except it means these upper tubes, the alignment gets way out of whack, and you might have issues putting in your bolt, or you might not even get it in at all. So you kind of have to play this dance between all 3 points, and you need to get them right before you weld that up. Right here, I've also made some clearancing right there for this coil spring because I was getting a little bit of contact at maximum compression. So I raised it up just a hair here, and then you can see I put a bit of a chamfer on that, and now that clears. Right here, I cut these out in these corners just to, for weight savings. It's not going to really do anything for strength because basically from this point back, it is solid. Right from here forward, you're going to want to leave the metal because that does have some strength to it. Plus, the point that I cut off, it wasn't touching any metal anyways, so it was just dangling there. On this side, I cut a hole, 7/8 hole, because I was getting some contact on the inside with the coil spring right here, and that wasn't good. So that gives me just a little bit of clearance, and it now barely clears, but yeah, needed to do that. Is it gonna cause any issues with strength? I don't think so. This is 3/16 steel plus this support right here makes this ultra strong, and I haven't done anything on this side, so I'm sure it's fine. And then lastly, you can see I removed all that mill scale, that coating that's on there. Super durable stuff, but this now gives me a nice clean surface to weld against. So this is ready to go into the car. Prior to installing the brackets, I did paint the inside of the frame, which once the brackets are in, I'm going to paint it again, but this gets all those spots that I'm not going to be able to get once the brackets are welded in place. Let's assemble these coilovers, starting with the eyelet bearing. You need to have yourself a set of C-clip pliers. I wish I had a better pair. This one's kind of suck, to be honest with you. Now, if you're running a T-bar like I am, which goes through your bearing like so, you're going to have to retain it with these C-clips here, which are very stiff and very hard to install. In fact, I've already broke 2 of these jaws just trying to install them. They're brutal. So I'm going to try to assemble this together before putting it into my shock body. I'll try to get this, but I found it using a hammer sometimes kind of works. Okay, this is a do what you gotta do kind of deal. That one's in. So it doesn't appear that that will go in like so. Gosh, those things are a bitch. If you were doing final assembly, you'd want to put a liberal amount of anti-seize on these threads, otherwise they could gall up and could also void your warranty. But I'm only doing this just to test fit everything, so we're not going to bother right now because it's so messy. First goes on the lock nut, and you'll notice there's a flat side and a slightly raised side. Apparently the raised side goes up. And then you'd put your base seat on.
take that bearing off first. You'd also want to grease up your thrust bearing. Throw that on. Extend this out to the maximum. We'll put our spring on. Like that. And then finally our upper seat goes like that. And then we compress this like that. And that is one completed coilover shock. Lovely. All right, let's talk about the weight differences between a factory style conventional spring setup and a coilover setup like this. The Global West extended travel kit, these weigh 3.8 pounds each, including the 1/2-inch bolt. With the modifications I've done, cutting out the back here and whatnot, I've taken off a 1/2 pound per bracket, so that's 3.3 pounds each, or 6.6 pounds. Now, it's impossible to measure just how much weight I've cut out of the frame, but it's about 2.6 pounds. That leaves me with an increase of 4 pounds on the chassis. The factory springs weigh 12.1 pounds. These Viking double adjustable shocks weigh 2.8 pounds, so 14.9 pounds. But in my case, I'm removing these shim stack out of the lower control arm, and that weighs 1.6 pounds each. So that's 16.5 pounds combined, or 33 pounds for both sides. The Viking coilover setup weighs 11.3 pounds each, or 22.6 pounds for both of them, giving us a 10.4 pound weight reduction in unsprung weight. However, we need to factor in the 4 pounds we put on the frame with these coilover brackets, giving us a total of 6.4 pounds in weight reduction. Now, if you went with a hybrid style coilover that didn't require these extended brackets and a shorter coilover setup, you might see an additional 6 pounds of weight reduction, and that would be pretty good. I have the bracket loosely bolted in. I have 3/32 worth of shims right here, and this through bolt is floating nicely. Now I need to tighten these bolts that go into the frame, and I'm going to do that back and forth until it's tight, ensuring that this bolt remains free moving. Oh, see how that's has tightened up? It's still too tight there. That's about as good as I can make it. This side's quite tight. This side's a little bit looser, but you can see this still moves freely. So we'll tack it into place and make sure everything still lines up. I got the brackets all welded in. I think they look pretty good. Plenty strong, that's for sure. But, I mean, I am still learning to weld, so cut me some slack on the beads. These bolts, they're running in nice and smooth. Same thing with the top one, so everything is square and straight. I'm happy about that. So it is now time for paint. But before I do that, I need to put aluminum foil over all the little things that I don't want painted. I just love this primer. It's not nearly as shiny in real life as it is on camera, but it just lays down so smooth. Love this stuff. For paint, I'm using this Marhide Black Satin 3811. It's got a great finish, looks similar to what you'd get from the factory. Just note this stuff is super, super stinky, so you're gonna wanna wear a mask and have good ventilation. Plus the nozzle on it is really stiff and it just kills your fingers. So I ended up buying this paint can trigger, and hopefully it's gonna make things a lot easier.
It's painted, it looks great. Let's put it all back together. Now for the coilover, remember lots of anti-seize on your threads, and it's also a good idea to put grease on your thrust bearing. Finito.
So that concludes the installation to our coilover setup. Access to the adjustment knobs, so much better than it was before. I love that. Obviously, I'm gonna need to get the car back together with the engine in and whatnot before I can set the ride height and tune the shocks, so stay tuned for a video on that. Was it worth it to go to coilovers? Yeah. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, you're really not going to gain much in terms of performance, but you will have a huge window of adjustability, and it's going to be easy to adjust, which is what the coilover's prime benefits are. And I'm very excited about that. I still maintain that an extended travel or long travel coilover kit is the better option, which is what I went with. Just note, you are going to have an assortment of cutoff wheels or grinders, as well as a welder. So it is a little bit more skilled required. But, I mean, I didn't know what I was doing. I'm not a professional, and I got it installed. So it can be done. I am still not 100% happy with the Global West version. I like the design in general. I think it's very strong and robust, but it had its issues, which we already talked about. I would love to see the UMI Performance version. I think it's a little bit more simplistic, certainly lighter, and I think it would be a little bit easier to install. Plus, doing this whole installation gave me an opportunity to work on other things on the car, including painting the frame, which I'm very happy about. I think it looks fantastic. I guess now it's just a matter of putting the whole thing back together and actually test driving it. So make sure you subscribe for that. If you found this video helpful, hit the like button. And as always, thanks for watching.